Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something personal. Have you ever walked into a room and seen him light up? Not with words, but with his eyes. That pause, that double take. That slight smile that betrays more than 1,000 compliments ever could. That, my friends, isn't just a greeting, that's a declaration. When you truly begin to choose yourself, something fundamental shifts in the way you observe people, especially in the way they show up for you. One of the most overlooked indicators of how someone feels about you is not in the compliments they give, or the plans they make for next week. It's in how they greet you. The moment you walk into a space, in their initial response is pure. It hasn't been filtered through thought, social obligation, or performance. It's instinctual. That greeting holds power because it reflects the truth of their feelings, often more than any carefully crafted words ever could. When a man is genuinely drawn to you, his greeting carries energy that makes you feel seen, chosen, and remembered. This is not about whether he smiles politely or says hello with social grace. It's about how his whole well-being responds to your presence. There's a difference between someone greeting you because they should have and someone greeting you because they can't help it. When a man is emotionally invested, his body responds first. His posture shifts. He might straighten up or lean in. His eyes search for yours, not because he's scanning the room, but because finding you gives him a moment of inner calm. His voice may become warmer, softer, or more enthusiastic, and for a brief second, it's like you're the only person who exists in that room. That greeting is charged with something deeper, an emotional frequency. And you'll begin to notice it more clearly when you're grounded in your own worth. Because when you've chosen yourself, you no longer accept energy that feels distant, hollow, or performative. You start paying attention to the subtleties. You observe who looks at who with joy and interest, and who simply looks past you. A man who's crazy about you may not even know what to say at first, but the way he lights up, how his tone, facial expression, and body language transform, is impossible to miss. That unfiltered reaction is where attraction lives. When you're not connected to your self-worth, it's easy to miss these signals. You might cling to the idea of what you hope someone feels, rather than noticing what they're actually showing you. You might chase validation from the person who's indifferent instead of responding to the one who lights up around you effortlessly. But when you've done the inner work, you no longer try to earn affection through over-giving or people-pleasing. You step back and let people reveal their truth, through their energy, their actions, and especially through that very first moment they see you. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you become guarded or emotionally unavailable. It means you become attuned in you. You become aware of the difference between genuine emotional engagement and casual niceness. You stop being flattered by politeness and start being moved by presence. Because someone who's crazy about you won't need to manufacture excitement. Their body will already be expressing it. The eyes don't lie. The voice reveals more than the words it speaks. The way they step toward you, rather than away, is a direct mirror of how they feel inside. There is a kind of emotional honesty in how people greet each other. It's raw, immediate, and unfiltered. You begin to notice the emotional heat in someone's hello, the curiosity in their glance, the softness in their tone. When a man is genuinely interested, his greeting doesn't feel like an obligation. It feels like a response he couldn't suppress, even if he tried. You can sense that he was waiting for you, thinking of you, maybe even hoping you'd show up. He may say nothing special, but the energy behind his haze says everything. This awareness isn't about reading into every social cue or creating fantasies around ambiguous gestures. It's about attunement, being present enough with yourself to notice when someone else is present with you. When you value yourself, you no longer chase meaning where there is none, and you recognize sincerity when you feel it. And that changes everything. You realize that the most romantic expressions often live in the simplest moments. A look, a tone, a hello. When a man is crazy about you, you'll feel it before he says it. Because the truth is, a man's greeting is never just a greeting. It's his subconscious revealing his emotional truth. And the more grounded you are in choosing yourself, the more you'll trust your ability to sense it. When you choose yourself, your perception of emotional honesty sharpens. You no longer search for meaning in the long-term promises people make or in the polished way they articulate their interest. You begin to understand that real emotion, the kind that cannot be faked or rehearsed, reveals itself in the very beginning, in the first 5 seconds of an interaction. That small window, so often dismissed, becomes the most telling. It's in those few moments that someone's true emotional state comes to the surface before they have a chance to control it. And if a man is genuinely drawn to you, if he's emotionally invested in you, that truth leaks out before any words are spoken or gestures are made. These first 5 seconds are raw. They're real. They're the place where instinct, not intellect, governs behavior. He doesn't have time to prepare a charming smile, adjust his tone, or decide which version of himself to present. The brain doesn't think that fast, but the body responds instantly to emotional stimuli, and so does the energy he carries. When you walk into a room and he sees you, his reaction is a direct reflection of how he feels inside. The change in his eyes, the sudden pause in his movement, the shift in his facial expression. All of it speaks louder than anything he will say afterward. You begin to observe how quickly his attention or energy changes at the sight of you, and that tells you more than 1,000 well-crafted texts ever could. Choosing yourself puts you in a position of silent power. You're no longer dependent on verbal affirmations to feel secure. You stop asking for clarity through excessive conversation and start observing the truth that's already in front of you. You know that someone who truly feels for you doesn't need to be prompted. Their reaction, their first 5 seconds, is the confession. It's not about whether he smiles or compliments you. It's about whether you sense life in his greeting, a brightness, a tension, a vulnerability he wasn't expecting to show. And you only notice these things when you're not performing, when you're grounded, when you're observing from a place of self-worth, rather than desperation. The first 5 seconds are also the space where presence lives. You'll feel whether he's with you in that moment or merely acknowledging your existence. Is he emotionally engaged or just being polite? That difference is everything. When a man is crazy about you, those 5 seconds are emotionally loaded. His eyes might soften. He may take a deep breath. His voice might catch slightly. He'll register your presence not just as something to respond to, but something he feels. It's subtle but undeniable. And the more attuned you are to yourself, the more effortlessly you pick up on it. There's also safety in recognizing this truth. When you no longer rely on extended conversations to convince you someone cares. You protect yourself from wasting time on people who only offer surface-level interest. You begin to trust your emotional radar, and that's only possible when you've chosen yourself first. You don't need someone to prove their feelings through constant reassurance. You know how emotion works, and you understand that what's genuine is immediate. It doesn't need build-up. It doesn't need explanation. It just is ooh. When you walk in and see how someone reacts to you instinctively, you also realize that love and connection aren't about trying to be the most beautiful, the most interesting, or the most lovable. They're about resonance. And resonance is felt, not performed. It's not in how much effort someone makes after you've already proven your worth. It's in how they respond before they've had a chance to evaluate or strategize. That's the space where you see who truly values your presence. Choosing yourself allows you to stop overanalyzing. It frees you from second-guessing, from constant decoding of mixed signals. You no longer overstay in places where the emotional truth is missing. You recognize that if the energy in those first 5 seconds doesn't feel real, present, and emotionally available, it likely won't get better with time. You stop trying to build a connection where the seed of emotion wasn't planted from the start. This kind of clarity doesn't make you cold or dismissive. It makes you clear. You don't rush to conclusions, but you honor what you feel. You give people space to show who they are without projecting your hopes onto them. And if those first 5 seconds carry warmth, attention, and a sense of emotional openness, you allow that to lead. Not because you're desperate for it, but because choosing yourself enough to expect nothing less. When you choose yourself, something powerful happens. You no longer settle for partial attention or fragmented energy. You begin to recognize the difference between someone who is simply around you and someone who is with you. Presence becomes your new standard. You notice it in the way a man focuses on you, not just when it's convenient, but when he genuinely feels something. When a man is crazy about you, he becomes fully present. His distractions fade. His mind centers, energy anchors itself in your direction. He doesn't just hear your words. He listens with his entire being. This shift in attention is not about obligation or manners. It's about desire and emotional connection. And it's only when you've chosen yourself that you start to see how rare and valuable this kind of focus truly is. Being present is not about staring at someone or nodding on cue. It's about a full body alignment. His eyes meeting yours, his mind silencing other thoughts, his posture relaxing into the moment. It's the kind of presence that makes you feel emotionally safe, because you can feel he's not just thinking about himself anymore. He's tuned into you. Your words carry weight. Your emotions register with him. Your energy affects his. When a man is emotionally invested, even the smallest detail you share feels important to him. That's not something that can be faked or forced. It's an instinctive response born from connection. You begin to realize that presence is a form of respect. It says, "You matter enough for me to put the world on pause." That's the difference between a man who is merely entertained by you and one who is emotionally engaged. And the deeper truth is, a man can't offer that kind of presence to you until you've first offered it to yourself. When you choose yourself, you become more present with your own thoughts, your needs, and your worth. You stop tolerating half-hearted interactions because you know how it feels to sit in your own full attention. You no longer chase distraction disguised as chemistry. You wait for focus. You wait for someone who enters the conversation with both heart and mind. Presence also reveals clarity. A man may be charming or socially skilled, but if his energy constantly drifts, if he's scanning the room, checking his phone, or not fully listening, you begin to trust that distance as a message. And when you've chosen yourself, you don't try to earn back someone's focus. You don't overperform to get their attention. You step back. You observe. You let their behavior tell you whether they're emotionally available. When you no longer need to be chosen to feel worthy, you're finally able to see clearly who is actually showing up. Presence also goes beyond conversation. It lives in the quiet moments, when someone is sitting next to you. Are they mentally there with you or somewhere else entirely? Do they make you feel like a priority without needing to say it? Do they stay in the moment or escape it? These are the questions that start to guide your connections once you've established a strong sense of self. You no longer ignore the feeling of being emotionally lonely next to someone. You stop gaslighting yourself when you feel disconnected. You trust your ability to feel the difference between someone who's performing affection and someone who's immersed in your presence. When a man is crazy about you, the world behind him blurs. His attention is not scattered. He's not calculating his responses, he's up there. That level of focus is rare, and once you've chosen yourself, you don't crave quantity of time anymore, you crave quality. Even a short moment with someone who's fully present means more than hours spent with someone who isn't. You become immune to surface-level connections because your emotional standard has changed. This shift into presence doesn't require grand gestures. It's often invisible to others but deeply felt by you. It's in the way he leans forward when you speak, the way he waits for your thoughts to land before responding, the way he notices your mood shift before you've said a word. Presence is a language of emotional fluency, and when a man speaks it, you don't have to ask where you stand. His focus tells you. His stillness with you tells you. His willingness to be with you, not just next to you, says everything. When you've chosen yourself, you don't just look for presence. You expect it. Because you know that love is not measured in big words or promises made under pressure. It's measured in the moment someone gives you their whole self, even briefly. When a man becomes present and focused on you, it's because something in him has shifted. And something in you made space for that kind of connection by choosing yourself first. When you choose yourself, you begin to notice things you once overlooked. You stop clinging to verbal affirmations and start reading what people are actually communicating through their presence, their behavior, their energy. One of the most honest signs that a man is emotionally drawn to you is the way he lights up when he sees you. Physically and emotionally, this reaction isn't planned. It's not a performance, it's a reflex. His face softens, his eyes widen, and for a moment, the mask he wears for the rest of the world slips away. That moment doesn't need words because it says everything. And you only begin to truly recognize that moment when you've committed to choosing yourself first. When a man is crazy about you, his entire demeanor changes the second you enter his space. His expression shifts. There's a spark in his eyes, a subconscious grin that appears even if he tries to hold it back. His shoulders may relax, his tone changes, and he becomes more emotionally available without even realizing it. This isn't something he forces. It's not something he thinks about. It's his natural emotional response to your presence. And it becomes unmistakably clear when you're grounded enough in your self-worth to observe without needing to be convinced. Choosing yourself gives you the patience to watch without reaching. You're no longer seeking constant validation because you already validate yourself. That means you're able to sit back and notice who naturally comes to life in your presence. You see who lights up because they're genuinely excited to see you, not because they're trying to impress you or manage your perception of them. There's no performance, no strategy, no calculation. There's just authenticity. And authenticity shows itself when someone can't hide their emotional reaction. When a man feels something real for you, his body expresses it before his mind can filter or manage it. The lighting up isn't always dramatic. It might be a subtle smile he didn't mean to show, a sudden stillness in his movement, a softness in his gaze, a rise in his energy that fills the room just from being around you. It might look like him forgetting what he was saying to someone else when you walk in, or the way he shifts to give you his full attention. These small signals are easy to overlook if you're focused on what you want to hear, but when you're focused instead on what you want to feel, they become obvious. When you've chosen yourself, you stop chasing emotional highs that come from inconsistency. You begin to notice the steady truth that's shown in behavior. A man lighting up around you is not something he can sustain if it's fake. Emotional reactions come from the heart, and they can't be manufactured without eventually showing cracks. But when it's real, it's consistent. He doesn't light up only when he needs something or when he feels lonely. He lights up because your presence genuinely brings him something he values. Comfort, excitement, connection, or even just peace. This reaction also tells you where his emotional investment lies. People don't light up around just anyone. That reaction is reserved for those who make them feel something deeply. And when a man lights up around you, you're not just someone he enjoys. You're someone who awakens something in him. You might not even have said anything yet. You could walk into the room with no makeup, no words, no agenda. And still, that light in him switches on. That's the kind of connection that's not about effort. It's about emotional resonance. Choosing yourself means you no longer chase after people who only give you flat energy. You don't explain away cold greetings or make excuses for blank expressions. You notice when there's no shift in energy, and instead of trying to fix it, you accept it. You realize that if your presence doesn't move someone, you're not where you're meant to be. Because the man who's for you won't need to be reminded to feel something when he sees you. He just will. This kind of emotional visibility is one of the clearest signs of genuine interest. And the more you value yourself, the more you'll trust what you see. When a man lights up around you, that moment is sacred. Not because it flatters your ego, because it mirrors the emotional truth you already feel about yourself. You've chosen your own light. You've nurtured your inner spark. So when someone reflects it back to you, you recognize it for what it is: real, unforced, and worthy of your attention. When you choose yourself, you start seeing the difference between attention and intention, between surface-level compliments and real emotional investment. One of the most liberating truths you come to accept is that genuine interest can't be faked or forced. It either exists or it doesn't. A man who is truly interested doesn't need constant prompting, coaxing, or convincing. His actions will align with his feelings, naturally and consistently. And you begin to see this clearly once you no longer chase approval or settle for breadcrumbs of affection. When your sense of worth comes from within, you're no longer blinded by charm, chemistry, or charisma that lacks emotional depth. You notice that real interest isn't loud. It doesn't always show up with flowers or dramatic confessions. It often arrives quietly but consistently. It's there in the way he remembers the small things you say, the way he makes room for you in his life without being asked, the way his presence feels stable and safe, not confusing or conditional. These aren't gestures born out of pressure or expectation, they're natural extensions of how he feels. And when you've chosen yourself, you learn to wait for that kind of clarity rather than try to build something from mixed signals. Choosing yourself teaches you to stop mistaking effort for interest. A man can put in effort and still not be emotionally invested. He might say the right things, send the good morning texts, make plans, and still not be all in. Because genuine interest is not just about what someone does, it's about why they do it. When someone is truly into you, their intentions are rooted in emotional connection, not convenience or routine. You can feel it in the energy. There's no tension in trying to hold their attention. You don't have to be performing constantly or adjusting who you are just to keep them interested. You stop entertaining situations where you're constantly questioning yourself. You no longer stay where you feel like you're always doing the emotional labor. Because when interest is real, it's felt by both people. It's not a one-sided pursuit. You don't have to dig for reassurance or twist yourself into knots trying to decipher behavior. You don't have to justify the emotional gaps with overthinking. Instead, you recognize that when it's real, there's emotional availability. There's a willingness to show up, not just in conversation but in consistency, in effort, and in presence. When you've chosen yourself, you also stop projecting your desire onto others. You stop falling in love with potential or the fantasy of who someone could be if only they saw your worth. You stop hoping that if you just do more, give more, love more, they'll eventually reciprocate. You realize that no matter how deeply you feel, you cannot manufacture feelings in someone else. If they're not emotionally drawn to you from the beginning, no amount of effort on your part will spark that flame. And this realization doesn't make you bitter, it makes you wise. You start noticing who is emotionally available and who is just emotionally inconvenient. Someone who genuinely wants you in their life will not leave you in a state of emotional confusion. Their interest will be visible in how they show up. Not only when it's easy, but when it requires honesty, vulnerability, and presence. And you don't chase it, because you've already chosen yourself. You've already filled the emotional gaps within you, so you're no longer desperate to fill them through someone else. This clarity becomes a filter. It helps you move away from situations that feel forced. You stop waiting for someone to become interested and start responding only to what's already there. You honor what people show you, not what you hope they'll become. You begin to understand that authentic connection cannot be created through pressure, manipulation, or wishful thinking. It has to grow from real emotional desire, and that kind of desire makes itself known without you having to search for signs. You trust the feeling of ease. You embrace the idea that love should not feel like a constant struggle to be noticed. You stop idolizing the chase and begin to prioritize peace. Because when someone is genuinely interested, their actions speak with a kind of effortlessness. They reach out because they want to, not because they feel obligated. They ask questions because they care, not because they're trying to check a box. They prioritize you not because you demand it, but because they value you. And you no longer settle for anything less than that kind of emotional honesty. When you choose yourself, you begin to understand that real power doesn't come from being chosen by others. It comes from your ability to choose who and what deserves access to you. You stop placing your value in someone else's hands and start recognizing that your awareness, your perception, your emotional intelligence is your strength. In relationships, that awareness becomes your compass. It guides your decisions, protects your energy, and helps you distinguish between what's real and what's performative. One of the most liberating truths you begin to live by is that your power lies in awareness, not chasing. Because chasing clouds your vision, while awareness sharps it. Chasing often comes from a place of insecurity, from a feeling that something needs to be earned or proven. It's an exhausting attempt to convince someone of your worth, to stay relevant in their mind, to force a connection that may not be mutual. It pulls your energy outward, scattering your focus and making someone else's behavior the center of your emotional world. You find yourself analyzing every message, interpreting every silence, and reshaping yourself to maintain someone's attention. And all of it feels heavy. All of it feels anxious. Because chasing disconnects you from your own emotional truth. But when you've chosen yourself, that cycle breaks. You're no longer operating from fear of being forgotten or overlooked. You understand that if someone is emotionally aligned with you, you won't need to chase them. Their energy will naturally meet yours. Instead of chasing validation, you become deeply aware of what you feel, what you need, and how people show up for you. You observe rather than pursue. You listen rather than force. You let the dynamic unfold and trust your instincts to interpret it, not your anxiety to overwork it. Awareness empowers you to notice how you feel in someone's presence. Do you feel calm, seen, emotionally safe? Or do you feel like you're always trying to perform, impress, or maintain their attention? That awareness lets you recognize when someone's energy isn't matching yours, and instead of trying harder, you simply step back. You no longer interpret inconsistency as a challenge or coldness as mystery. You see it for what it is, misalignment, and instead of proving your worth, you protect it. When you live from awareness, you see the red flags early. You don't ignore drained you feel after certain interactions. You trust the subtle discomforts, those moments when you feel dismissed, interrupted, or misunderstood. And rather than try to win that person over, you reflect on why you're drawn to someone who doesn't reflect your value. This reflection is the root of your power. It keeps you aligned with your worth and prevents you from repeating patterns where you abandon yourself just to feel wanted. You also become more attuned to genuine connection. You can sense when someone's interest is sincere and when it's situational. You no longer need dramatic declarations or long conversations to figure it out. You feel it in the ease of their presence, in the consistency of their energy, in the small ways they create emotional safety. This awareness brings peace, because it reminds you that real connection doesn't need to be chased. It naturally reveals itself when both people are present, open, and emotionally available. When you stop chasing, you reclaim your time, your energy, and your emotional space. You stop waiting for someone to validate your worth and start responding to the truth of how they treat you. You don't try to fill silence with effort. You let the silence speak. You don't create excuses for emotional unavailability. You accept it and move forward. You don't force a connection to grow in dry soil. You plant your energy where it's nourished, where it's reciprocated, where it feels emotionally alive. Choosing yourself teaches you that your intuition is sacred. The more you honor it, the more powerful it becomes. You no longer lose yourself in pursuit of someone else's approval. You're grounded. You're clear. You trust that you are enough as you are, and anyone who cannot meet you with the same depth is not someone you need to chase. Because awareness keeps you rooted in reality, and reality is where love thrives. Not in fantasy and effort, not in chasing, but in clarity, presence, and emotional alignment.